Hi, everyone. I'm Rosemary Miller. The NAACP recently issued a travel advisory for the state of Florida, and today I have Leon Russell, the chairman of the NAACP Board of Directors, joining me to talk a little bit about it. Thank you so much for joining me.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, Leon, you have received quite a bit of backlash after this travel advisory was announced, starting with DeSantis calling it a stunt, and we have the chairman of the Florida GOP, Christian Ziegler, saying, and I quote, "The chairman of the NAACP lives in Tampa, Florida. True leadership is being willing to do what you ask others to do. Time to step up and move. If you think our state is so bad, the Florida GOP will help with moving costs." Leon, what is your response to that statement?
Bullshit. Now, for to be serious, first of all, the governor should know a stunt when he sees one, because he's been doing them his entire administration. With respect to the travel advisory, nothing in the NAACP travel advisory asked anyone to leave the state of Florida. What it specifically says is if you intend to visit Florida, you need to be aware of these things which we consider to be the new Jim Crow. We have a state legislature that has enacted laws that are reminiscent of the 1890s, not even the 1990s. They're laws that are intended to create discrimination because they target women, they target the LGBTQ community, they target Black folk, they target immigrants. They spew hate, and therefore we believe that anyone who is thinking about visiting the state of Florida ought to consider the ramifications of the policies that legislators and the current administration of this state have put in place. Secondly, it's about safety. It warns those who are, again, thinking about coming to Florida that they need to think about safety, because most of the legislation that this legislature has adopted is cruel. It is cruelty based. It creates and fans the flames of hate. And we know, we have witnessed that politicians fanning the flames of hate can lead to violence. It leads to mass murder in our synagogues, in our grocery stores, in our public schools, in our temples across the country. And so we're saying, if you're planning on visiting Florida, you need to be aware of public policy in Florida that may have a damaging impact on you and your family. Secondly, let me deal with the idiot who runs the Republican Party of the state of Florida. First of all, we're not telling anybody to leave. What we're saying is it's time to stand and fight. We're telling people to stand your ground. We're telling them that they need to organize. They need to understand that the solution to the problems created by our legislature and our governor are political. They need to organize a civic engagement campaign. They need to become a part of a civic engagement campaign. If organizations are planning on visiting the state of Florida, we encourage them to do that. But what we want them to do is to raise up and highlight the Jim Crow nature of the legislation that the leaders of this state have adopted in the last year. We want them to make it a highlight of their convenings to inform their members about that. But secondly, we want them to inform their members that they need to join with the NAACP, with immigrant groups, with LGBT groups, and organize a campaign set to clean up our legislature, to make changes so that public policy in this state exists in a way that does not foment hate and division, but truly lifts the population. So no, we're not going anywhere. We're going to stand and we're going to organize, and we are going to resist this retrenchment of civil rights that the leadership of the state of Florida is attempting to impose on our state.
Well, do you actually think this travel advisory will work? I mean, I can just imagine a group of sisters right now, their plane tickets are paid for, hotels reserved. I just don't see them canceling their trips.
We said, did you hear me say that we were telling anybody to cancel a trip? I said, if you're coming.
If they're coming.
Be aware. If you have a convening, make pointing out the inequities of the legislation a part of your convenings program. Ask your members to engage in organizing. I didn't tell anybody not to come.
But if you're issuing a travel advisory, it's advising people, I guess, as you said, of the ramifications that could potentially happen if you do visit Florida. So is this basically a media stunt, or did you all actually expect some kind of change?
Which part of this don't you understand? Let's get straight.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get straight. So if you're coming to Florida and you're concerned about DEI, then if you think about the advisory and the things in the advisory, you will say, well, where can I go in Florida that will support a corporation that stands up for diversity and inclusion, that stands up for civil rights, that is inclusive to the extent that it has policies that don't discriminate against people because of who they look. So what I'm asking people to do is to think before they come. Think about where they go, think about who they support.
So as a little Black girl from Mississippi, wouldn't it also be wise of me to think before I traveled there?
If the state of Mississippi wants us to consider a travel ban, that's one thing. But we do this in a myriad of ways. We state the need for awareness. We tell people to look for corporate entities that support their movement. We use litigation if we're in the state of Mississippi and people are trying to take away the rights of a Black community. We use litigation and the electoral process to deal with that. There's no cookie cutter approach. Mm-hmm. And the fact of the matter is, with the amount of hate and the legislation being used by conservative groups across the country, there's nowhere to go to escape it. So what I'm saying is be aware of what goes on in your legislature, be aware of the policies that are being made, and wherever you are, organize, understand that this is a political situation, organize your people, develop voter education, voter registration, and get out the vote campaigns, whether it be at the school board level, the city council level, the county commission level, wherever policymakers are elected, organize, reflecting the fact that there are people who are going into public office who want to go backwards. If you are against that, make yourself aware of those situations and act accordingly.
I guess I'm just having a hard time understanding why a travel advisory is necessary to bring awareness. There are many ways to bring awareness without scaring the public and, honestly, not to put money over race, hurting your tourism dollars.
Again, we're not telling anybody not to come. We're saying use your money wisely. Mm-hmm. And let me be more specific, since you don't seem to be able to understand what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. If you're coming to Florida, you need to go to Disney, because Disney has stood up against this anti-diversity and inclusion effort. Disney has stood up and said this type of legislation is wrong. So what I'm saying is analyze the situation, be aware of what's going on, and use that information to make your decisions. What's hard to understand about that?
It's not that it's hard to understand. It's just, it seems a bit unnecessary. It seems like you're telling Black people, because I'm telling you, this is how a lot of Black people
recognize that hate is dangerous. The dead people at the grocery store in Buffalo recognize that hate is dangerous. So yes, fear might be one element of what needs to happen. People need to think about their safety.
Well, Leon, what's your reaction to Governor DeSantis potentially running for president in 2024?
We need to organize, recognizing the legislative history of people who put themselves forward for public office. We need to educate the voters about what those people have done and the policies that they have put in place. And we need to encourage folks to go out and vote. I could care less if the current governor decides to run, and he will announce, I'm sure, later this week. My point is that we need to look at everyone who puts themselves forward for public office and determine whether the policies that they have implemented, that they have initiated, are worthy of consideration for any office, much less the highest office in the land.
So if you were forced to choose, would you choose Trump or DeSantis?
Those are non-starters in my world.
Good answer. Okay, do you have any response to Tim Scott's announcement to run for president?
Great campaign for vice president.
All right, Mr. Russell, I think we've covered everything. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Let me reiterate, and I want you to, for those people who you're dealing with, I want them to understand, we're not telling any Floridian to leave Florida. We're telling them to stand and fight against oppressive legislation, organize themselves, and involve themselves in a collaborative effort with others who believe the same. Thank you for this interview.
Thank you.